Hi there. This is my reaction review breakdown analysis thing for House of the Dragon Season 2 Episode 4, The Red Dragon and the Gold. Now, the way I approach this is I try to narrow down the discussion on the top 7 most notable things about an episode, either good or bad, just the top 7 discussion points, and 7 of them because 7 is a good number, of course. Well, some preamble first, that out of a 5-page script I made for my analysis here, pages 1 through 4 are all on the battle. Because obviously it's the focus of the episode, and I'm not just going over, wow, there was a cool explosion, but how they filmed it, different character choices. I won't always do that for a battle episode. I don't want to just focus on, the spectacle, but it ended up being that way, and a lot of it's technical stuff. That takes up points 1 and 2 out of 7, and it's 4 out of 5 pages for my script here. Because the other parts, while notable, were just, kind of what more can I elaborate on. This part was done well, that everything was just lead up to the battle. Sometimes you might have dual storylines that merit their own stuff in the future, but that's how it shook out now. Also, for preamble, that we don't find out the names of episodes or the writers until they air now, that they're not putting those out in advance. We do know the directors for every episode because people could obviously tell from physical production, spy reports, so they publicly admitted and have shown pictures, these are the directors of all of them. Turns out, unsurprisingly, this episode was directed by Alan Taylor and written by showrunner Ryan Condal, which is the same writer-director pairing as the Season 2 premiere. Which, yeah, I could tell that tonally and quality-wise, it was on that level, more or less, compared to some that you can tell Patel uses very advanced camera work for certain more psychological things, but not that I'm complaining, this is fine. It's just, it felt like the pairing of Condal and Taylor. In post-episode interviews, Taylor said, they asked, are you going to come back to the franchise? He said, yes, but I'm going to take a year off because I took so much time away from my family filming this big battle thing. So he's not coming back for Season 3. He might come back for other stuff. I'd welcome him back. As I've said before, he was like on Game of Thrones Season 1 and 2, and then later came back for 7 when things were getting bad, that I said, even by comparison to Sapochnik, it's not the directors that were at fault. They were being micromanaged by Benioff and Weiss, and that you see the contrast in how Taylor filmed this as a battle episode compared to just how weird the White Hunt looked in Season 7, where he clearly didn't want to film it like that with the constant close-ups, the bad pacing. They were really telling him what to do, and that when you see, without those constraints, the same people doing a better job, you can tell it was the writer's fault. Oh, another thing, this doesn't normally come up, they renamed this episode, or at least we think they did, that there was a filming sheet leak that for months we thought the title of this was A Dance of Dragons, like the book title, and they must have changed it relatively late in production. It's a good change because it would be too confused with there's a similar title in Game of Thrones, the book title. Better name change to The Red Dragon and the Gold. That's the title of one of the chapters in Fire and Blood that it's based on. So, okay, better name change, writer-director pairing, and most of this I will be talking about the battle. Both character stuff and then the logistics of how they realized it, that's more point 2, and technical decisions they made. Some preamble to both points, though. This applies to both of those. I wasn't immediately wowed by this, but I got more and more impressed the past few days that I've been rewatching it. So now I actually do really like it, but it was a journey. And I've realized I had one of the most conservative positions on this. Even like Westeros.org really liked it in their initial video review of it, and they're the book fan site. So I was one of the few that was, but then we came around. I've seen that reaction from other book channels. A few of the other hardcore ones where you changed a thing here or a thing there, but I worked it out, so I'm actually better on it now. That I think it comes down to, I can't unread a book, Whenever you see an adaptation, that you can't unread the book, you're always going to be mentally comparing The Battle of Rook's Rest version that has lived in my head rent-free since I read the book, the initial novella 10 years ago, is slightly different from what they did in the TV show, and that is a totally unfair comparison. This comes up in any adaptation, like Season 2 had a broadly faithful adaptation of the Battle of the Blackwater because Neil Marshall is a good director. Then he also came back to direct, I think, the much superior Battle of Castle Black in Season 4. That I wouldn't change anything in the Battle of Castle Black in Season 4, but in terms of the scale and certain story beats, it isn't exactly like what the book did. It is similar. There aren't drastic changes. It's just literally beat for beat, sword swing for sword swing. It isn't exactly the thing in my head. And again, I think those battles are good because of Neil Marshall, and he was one of the few directors, because he was a movie director with a career outside of them. Marshall was one of the few people who really complained about Benioff and Weiss at the time, and first let us know what you see is PR propaganda, that they are very demanding on set and were constantly trying to micromanage me, and I would refuse, and then they'd back down, but then try to go around me, that they didn't really know what they were talking about, but would bully people around anyway, but whole other topic, which I've discussed at length before. But in terms of just Battle of Castle Black is amazing, but it's not beat for beat what I would have done, but I still really liked it. And again, it applies to any adaptation like Lord of the Rings. The very first time I saw Helm's Deep, it wasn't line for line the version that lived in my head because I'd read the book first. Best example, Dune Part 2, which I saw earlier this year. I made a review of it on my channel, and I really liked it. Not even just story points, just battle choreography is slightly different than the version that has been burned into my head since I read it in junior high. And I imagine, I didn't read the Harry Potter books before I saw the movies, but I imagine just there's always slight differences between something that's really stand out in your head versus what they actually do. And it's not even things I can cite as a change. That's the thing, that my list of things they changed, that's not even getting into just I thought there'd be a lot more prolonged other stuff with the ground battle, beat by beat. That is totally an unfair comparison. And I just realized that I was gloomy of, am I the only one who was like, it was okay. Literally the first time I watch it, I've noticed that with Dune Part 2 as well, that the first time you see an adaptation, you're comparing the battle scene to the thing that lives in your head. But every subsequent viewing, once you've been braced and know what's coming, there isn't a surprise anymore, you're free to enjoy it, and I did, a lot. So, is this the best battle ever put to the screen? Well, in terms of Dragon Battle, the Season 8 air-to-air combat stuff was poorly filmed, even regardless of the fact it was too dark to see anything. And going for spectacle, I'm going to get into this in terms of how they filmed this. This raised the bar for the camera work part of Dragon filming. The ground battle is kind of there. In terms of battles I'm looking forward to, even in the book it says the largest ground battle of the war, which doesn't involve dragons, is the climax of the Riverlands campaign, the Battle of the Lakeshore. And that's a spoiler-free thing, just it's called the Battle of the Lakeshore, and it's coming. They really need to do a good job on that. That will be the thing that needs to raise the bar for ground battles. And the giant dragon battle, which is also armies and dragons, is second Tumbleton, but we'll get to that. But this, for general audiences, were just blown away by this. On top of that, it seems that this has really led to a recovery in the viewership numbers. You see, Season 1, they premiered with 9.9 million viewership across HBO and Max combined. And I think by episode 2 it went up to 10.2 million, but for the rest of the season it was like 9 point something. So slightly under 10 million on average for the first day of viewership. First night viewership, 24-hour period. And the whole point with Max and everything is you can delay it a bit, but most people watch premiere night. When Season 2 premiered, I was going to do a separate video on this, there isn't time, so let me just dump it out now. Season 2 premiere was 7.4 million or something, that it was relatively low. And what did you expect when it's been off the air for almost 2 years? That they needed to go on pause to plan out the future seasons, because they didn't know if Season 1 would be a hit. And I don't blame them for that, and I'm not pearl clutching of, oh no, the ratings are so drastically down, anything off the air this long without another show to alternate with in a cinematic universe, you're going to get a ratings drop. That's to be expected. Well, the viewership numbers for this episode went back up to 8.1 million. This was a season high. I guess because the trailers openly show the big battle is coming this episode, so anyone who normally put off watching it for a couple of days made it event viewing, is my theory of when ratings go up like that, because it wasn't a surprise that this is the battle episode. So everyone came and saw it, and I am noticing a real shift. I don't know how drastic of a shift, but finally things are starting to go viral, as they say, that in social media, in terms of just review sites actually choosing to make more articles about House of the Dragon. It's a self-feeding system that the better the show does, the more articles they make, which gets more people to watch, which drives everything. So I've noticed a real tone shift, and just in reaction channels going, my god, Game of Thrones is back, in a way they didn't really, even people who loved season 1. I guess people just really like battle spectacle, and don't we all? But again, I've seen others, the book fandom, like Westeros.org, Red Team Review, Preston Jacobs, saying episode 2 was still slightly better to us, and the thing that's going to win all the Emmys. Because in terms of the character performances, I mean, this wasn't a heavy Rhaenyra episode, wasn't a heavy Alicent or Otto episode. The Emmys and stuff, and the direction and pacing, and the best drama was clearly episode 2, which did have a good fight scene in it. The one-on-one duel, like a really well-choreographed one-on-one duel, can be better than it's kind of just perfunctory battle scene, depending on, how you film it. There's nothing like two ninjas fighting each other in an epic fight scene, or two Jedi, versus it's just a large battle of clone troopers and battle droids shooting at each other. Point is, this was still really good, and we need the action to get back the crowds. That's what the crowds come for, the action. Didn't disappoint. And a lot of this is going to be me talking about how it's not just, the spectacle. Battle of the Bastards was not well filmed. It was empty spectacle of throwing stuff at the screen. But in terms of choreography, pacing, it was not carefully filmed, because it was focusing on Kit Harington all the time to show him off for Emmys. From a technical standpoint, this was better filmed in terms of cinematography, which is no surprise. Any good cinematography that came from Bastards was something we have citations, Sapochnik saying, I had to argue to put that in. Like, the version of Battle of Bastards they wanted was just a 20-minute, literally, a 20-minute version of that one-er shot that lasts 1 minute, focused on Kit Harington wandering around in a melee. They wanted that for 20 minutes. And that's really all they ever conceived of as a battle. That's basically what Hardhome was. They wanted this for Battle of the Bastards. Then the White Hunt is just Harington hacking away at zombies, and then Season 8 battles, it's just Arya, 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 John, John, John. There aren't tactics or battle choreography or cinematography on any level. It's what they were always trying to do. In Battle of the Bastards, Sapochnik managed to talk them down. So, point is, this wasn't the version that lives in my head. I wasn't raving like a fanboy at first. It grew on me every time I rewatched it, and I'm impressed with it from a technical cinematography standpoint. And I'm happy that the ratings are going up, because apparently people are like, when are the dragons coming? George, when are the pizzas coming? When are the pizzas coming? Butters and the other kid, we ordered the pizzas. Look, they're coming. I'm about to order them. You haven't ordered the pizzas yet? Is the South Park joke. But I mean, the first shot after the cold open in Season 1 was, hey, here's the dragons. Rhaenyra riding her dragon. You don't have to wait for a couple of seasons to see the dragons being flown around anymore with riders. They did that first thing. That's no accident. And we got a dragon fight sequence in the finale, though I realized it was more of a chase and just laying waste to Arrax like that. That wasn't a head-on fight. This is the first time we had a head-to-head fight with a mature dragon. Obviously, Vagar's huge, but Meleys could actually fight it, not just be running from it. And ground troops on both sides. So this is the first real battle. We've known for a long time this would be the real test. So, people impressed by it was a horror show in the season 1 finale versus this is a battle. And I am just seeing things starting to spiral, go viral in a good way, that this is really boosting the show again. But here I am 15 minutes into this, I'm sorry, but now I'm just breaking down technical standpoint. Points 1 and 2, when I said, oh, this is all preamble, that's my overview thoughts on the battle. I'm 15 minutes into this, I'm sorry, but point 1 is the slight change of suggesting Aemon tried to kill Aegon. And then point 2 is all talking about technical stuff with the cinematography and just how they realized it was better than the physical work on Game of Thrones, which was incompetent. But point 1, initially this was another big thing that really threw me off. That this is a bit of a change from the book, which at the time when I first saw it, I realized I thought it's a bigger change than it actually is. That at the time I was upset at first, but this is why I don't make immediate reaction videos anymore, that I realized calming down and thinking on it, mulling it over, okay, is it really that different? Like, even hardcore book fans, again, Westeros.org forums, other hardcore book fans, not Elio and Linda, just the crowd there, I was discussing it with other fans for a couple of days, and they convinced me otherwise. That, well, really, how is this that different from the book? And I went, you're right, I was wrong. I was too strict on this. In the book version, both Aegon and Aemond are part of the planned trap. In the TV show, Aegon impulsively joins in. And in the behind-the-scenes video afterward, cast and crew kept insisting, multiple people, it's supposed to be deliberately ambiguous whether Aemond really tried to kill Aegon, or whether he just had an attitude of, okay, you want to make a fool of yourself and rush into battle and get yourself killed? Why do I keep protecting you from yourself? That you want to rush ahead and make yourself a fool? Fine, as a spur-of-the-moment thing, that clearly he didn't even plan on him being there. That I don't care if you get caught in the crossfire if you're going to keep doing something that stupid. I'm thinking of, like, in a first-person shooter multiplayer thing where if there's a guy who keeps running in front of everyone else in the way of his own team's rocket launchers, at a certain point you get so frustrated, you stop. If there's a guy constantly running into your line of fire, blocking your shots, enough. Eventually it reaches this hair-pulling point where, why are we... It's not worth avoiding the shot anymore. You're being so stupid with this, running ahead into our line of fire. I get that. I wasn't sure at first, though, but others insisted, no, on rewatch, it makes a lot of this actually does make sense. I didn't believe them at first when they said, oh, we wanted it to be ambiguous. That if you look at the actual camera work on repeated viewing, they kind of implied too well that Aemond was trying to kill him, but if you actually look at what he's doing, the camera work implies it too much. It's a little more ambiguous, that when he is flying up to flame both of them, they are spiraling around. The camera work is it's a static shot for 1 second. It cuts from Aegon's face to Vhagar shooting at the camera, makes it implied that he's trying to burn him specifically. But if you stand back and focus in your mind on what is happening beyond the camera that they've established in wide shot, Meleys and Sunfire are spiraling in midair, and there is no way to single out one of them. So he does have an attitude of, screw it, I'll shoot both because I can't get a clear shot at just one of them. Is different from, it makes it look like he was focusing on him. And other things like, no, at the end when they're on the ground, he was already sheathing his sword in his scabbard before Criston Cole came. But it's shot so convincingly that the implication, oh no, was he unsheathing his sword? He was already sheathing it. It's just, the camera work did it a little too well to give that ambiguity, that he was actively trying to kill specifically him. But the second thing that really convinced me this isn't that drastic of a book change, that first he wasn't trying to single him out, that, well, he shot at him if you, like, shoot a bazooka at two people who are grappling with each other, you're still trying to kill me. Others have pointed out, again from the book forums, even in the book version, that's not really that different from what Vhagar did. That in the book version, Sunfire and Meleys are grappling, and Vhagar swoops down from above, tackling both of them to the ground with her massive body and crushing them underneath her. And they fall as this swirling tumble of three dragons. She falls on top, and Meleys takes the brunt of it, so she's burnt to a crisp because, the flames and everything. Sunfire's badly injured. Most of Sunfire's injury, even in the TV show, I think, is due to what Meleys did. The worst part is that you see she broke his arm, dislocated his shoulder really bad. That's what happens in the books. That's the worst of it. Slashes in the belly, you can recover from that. Flames don't even hurt dragons that much. You see, when he's a little singed, like, that'll hurt Aegon. It won't hurt Sunfire that much, or even the fall that much. It's that she managed to break his shoulder is the worst injury there. That it is going to be really hard for him to recover from. Because, a broken bone is something that takes a long time for dragons to heal from, if at all. But they just point out, what's the difference between Vhagar indiscriminately tackling both to the ground and Vhagar blasting both with fire indiscriminately because they're swirling while grappling and you can't single out one of them? And I went, you're right. And in fact, in the book, because it's an outline, in Fire and Blood, someone should have called out, why did Aemond tackle both of them to the ground when that seriously could have gotten Aegon killed? And they should have at least had him address something like, if I didn't take the shot, Meleys was on the verge of killing him anyway. So I had to shoot at all and hope he'd somehow get out of it. So I'm hoping that episode 5 later on, or like in private moments with Sylvie or something, he'll explain what really happened, just like with Luke, where I wasn't really trying to kill him. That I'm hoping, this isn't wishful thinking, it's with the camera work you see, I'm motioning with my hands too much, you can't see that. That it was the implication removes you from that they're really in a death spiral, that he couldn't aim for one or the other. Is this really that different from the book where he tackles both instead of flames both? And someone in the book should have remarked on this, that they end up as collateral damage. So, people argued me that on the book forum. Book forums were arguing in favor of this, as it's not really that big of a change. And they convinced me otherwise. You're right, it's not. People like Westeros.org's Elio and Linda in their video review really liked it, didn't consider it that big of a change. So I've seen some channels that made like same-day reactions. I'm not going to single any out by name, but I urge you, if you watch my stuff here, look at the camera work. They faked us out a little too well of, oh no, is Aemond really trying to kill him? But okay, let you have your fake outs and stuff, as long as they follow up on, well, I wasn't really trying to. We'll see how later episodes play this, but at first I thought it was absurd when they were saying behind the scenes it was ambiguous. Then I realized it was, if you rewatch it, so that's why I stopped making immediate things, that every episode of this season has actually gotten better on rewatch. Whereas Game of Thrones, you keep realizing even more flaws. And even if you hated the episode, you realize even more plot holes in like season 5, season 6 onward. The more you rewatch, the less sense it makes. House of the Dragon consistently up to now, the more you watch it, the more it has made sense to me. Or at least, there's willing suspension of disbelief for certain things. I'm not like Preston. I love Preston Jacobs' work, but he often is trying to have Chad finding faults in it. I accept that there are certain guarantees you need to make to keep the drama going, but as long as it's internally consistent, I'm okay with that. This works fine. They tackle them, blast them with fire, really, dude, what the hell? That happens in both versions. So I'm 24 minutes into this, and this is all of my thoughts on the story points. It's pretty much what the book did, except for the Aegon part, but I've worked through that. Otherwise, the rest of this is 0.2 out of 7. Specific choreography, cinematography, and filming of the battle at Rook's Rest, and how all of this was so much better than the way Game of Thrones made it a fiasco behind the scenes. And this is another, when I keep saying this is the build-up of, it isn't exactly the version in my head. Well, the version in my head, which is kind of the book version, is, and this is a much lesser degree. And I wasn't even that enthusiastic about yelling about this. It's in the book, Kristen Cole's forces, anticipating a dragon coming, do have anti-dragon tactics that don't work, but he has teams of archers ready to try and snipe melees. He has scorpion bolts ready to try and snipe melees. Even and explicitly, they know we can't really hurt a dragon. It describes Kristen is running through his columns of archers, running behind them, shouting, "Aim for the rider! Aim for the rider!" So that is a mental image in my head of they're fruitlessly trying to shoot specifically Rhaenys, but she's such a skilled rider that she's weaving and dodging, using the dragon's body, making sure it's a shield between her and the ground, and banking so that they can't get a bead on her. That was the version in my head, and they didn't do that. But after watching the behind-the-scenes stuff, they gave a very good reason. Well, they explicitly said, it's not that they kind of forgot. They said, our interpretation of the battle and the thing we wanted to emphasize is once the dragons show up, the humans on the ground are ants. That this is the metaphor they keep using is nuclear warfare, that dragons are like unleashing the nukes. And it's the comparison is they say it's like being infantry and seeing a nuclear blast going off next to you. There is nothing you can do. You are ants compared to this. So they said we were trying to show how helpless the infantry were once the dragon shows up. And yet, even in the book version, they do not manage to hurt Melees or get Rhaenys because she's an experienced rider. The most you can do is like hit and run tactics like what they did in the Stepstones. It's not the same thing. Again, they keep going, oh, well, a scorpion bolt managed to kill Meraxes in Dorne. It was a 1 in a million shot against a flying, moving target that somehow managed to pierce her eye into her brain. That just hitting her right in the eye, this flying, moving target, 1 in a million shot. And when you only have 3 of these things, and they take years to grow, if not decades, to a full size, that is a risk worth taking. That they're not totally invincible. They're just short of totally invincible. So it would have been fruitless anyway. So yeah, emphasize this is just a slaughter for the ground troops on both sides. I mean, the ground troops, the blacks are all in the castle. The greens on the ground. Just Vagar's crushing her own people. There's ash everywhere from Melees flaming them too. I came around to that. This is the way they were trying to craft it to emphasize a theme. Oh my god, themes in a Westeros show of this is a complete game changer. They are powerless against these things. And maybe they're trying to set up a character arc, story arc for the world in general, that there hasn't been dragon warfare in so many decades that they don't really know how to respond to it in Westeros. But the Greens are going to ally with the Triarchy, who are fighting Caraxes and Sea Smoke in the Stepstones. In the book it says, when the Triarchy forces come in on the Green side, they are experienced fighting dragons, so they don't immediately panic and settle into hit-and-run attacks and trying to snipe the rider with arrow fire. That they're experienced at that. So maybe that was just a setup that these green soldiers like Gwaine Hightower and his people would just panic at we don't know what to do, versus these guys in the Stepstones from the Triarchy will be reacting like we'll try to snipe them with scorpion fire, try to get arrows, use hit-and-run attacks, do something. Use grappling hooks to mess them up, something like that. So maybe they're going somewhere with that, of just seeing how war evolves over time. Tactics and counter-tactics. We saw the Triarchy doing this in the TV show by episode 3 of season 1, where they say, well, they're using guerrilla warfare, they're using archers to try to hit Daemon to the point he had to retreat, all of that. So, other than that, the point here is I'm talking about the physical aspect of it. The ground battle wasn't a major focus, but they clearly explain it was never meant to be the cavalry charge of the Battle of the Bastards. They said They make it a clear point in the episode. The ground assault on the castle is bait to lure a dragon out. That any Red Dwarf fans in the audience here, tell me in the comments, Red Dwarf, that great episode Meltdown, where they're on the Wax World theme park with, it's like Westworld, with the good side and the bad side. And Rimmer says, I have a cunning plan. We will make a assault across the minefield under cover of daylight. Under cover of daylight. And the point is, it's a diversion. That while they're doing that, someone's going to sneak in and sabotage them, and that actually works at horrendous cost. But it reminded me so much of the Meltdown Wax World episode of Rook's Rest. That we're going to attack Rook's Rest under cover of daylight within dragon range from Rhaenyra's base on Dragonstone. Yeah, because it was trap. So that clearly makes sense. I love how they use different heraldry to show there's different groups of levies that they have, and that he's using up the other ones as cannon fodder rather than the Hightowers one, which people do that in the book. It entirely makes sense. Like, Roose Bolton sends other houses first. When Jaime threatens to force a siege at Riverrun, he says, I will send the river lords who bent the knee first, then the Freys, and only once they are exhausted, and when your guys are exhausted, will my fresh Lannister troops come in and suffer relatively light losses. So attacking in waves, using up your faithless allies first, is actually a thing in the book. That's actually really smart. That makes sense. That's clever writing, I mean. So, okay, there wasn't much of a ground battle, it wasn't meant to be, but I'm just having so much fun looking at the behind-the-scenes video from a technical standpoint, not a drama standpoint, rewatching the episode and going, this is really good stunt work, this is really good camera work. Like, when you see the battering ram teams getting taken out in the first shot, like, those are real stuntmen. The arrows coming in their shields, this is before the dragons even show up, and just the dirt flying everywhere, that the skill that went into filming this, it's not meant to be a focus, but a lot of work went into that, and I was really impressed with it, just the scale they did. That they said they had 500 extras on this, and they were filming at Bourne Wood, and we have a lot of spy photos of this, because they knew that they had no hope of hiding it. I really like two things they explained specifically about the camera work that went into this, of how they filmed the dragons fighting. That, okay, this is Ghidorah versus Rodan in the sky, that the ground forces are ants, they're getting devastated, they're not even the focus of it. But it's cool that they have actual wide shots showing off the whole army, but the two really good camera work things were how they filmed the dragons, which they point out. First, as Ryan Condal has mentioned leading up to it, he's talked about this in interviews, but now we really get to see it in full effect. How they chose to shoot air-to-air combat. That we saw a bit of this in the first two episodes, like there's this shot, a POV shot when Daemon is riding into Harrenhal at night, but it's not a combat scene, it's at night, it's dark. He explained in the big intro video to the season, in other interviews, we are going to film air-to-air combat following the way Star Wars did it with starfighter dogfights, with X-Wings and TIE fighters, that all that Star Wars in turn really did was directly copy how World War II movies would use camera footage from actual combat. And I don't mean only. At the time, that was really revolutionary. Instead of just having, like the flying saucer on a string, that blew people's minds, that it's starfighters in this science fiction space, but you're filming it like realistic World War II movies that use combat footage, that the camera isn't omniscient. That's a big point that Game of Thrones got sloppy with, that we're going to perfectly show something off with an omniscient camera, only to then focus on the actors anyway, and I dare anyone to say the air fight sequences in Season 8, Episode 3 were good, because they were so dark to begin with, but this is light years beyond that, that rather than have an omniscient camera, Ryan Condal said it's like there's recovered gun camera footage, that there's like a cameraman sitting behind the rider. It's like you're looking through the eyes of someone sitting behind Rhaenys or behind Aemond. And the way they achieved that was by quite literally, they show it in behind-the-scene video, they have this camera arm above and behind the riders on the dragon buck rig. It's almost like a shoulder-mounted camera. It's slightly behind them, moving along with them. So when the buck leans left, the camera leans left with them. It really is this over-the-shoulder camera. And in terms of the riders' movements, they'll correspond to the blue screen later, but what I'm trying to explain is there's that point when Meleys turns upside down to claw at Vhagar from below, and they start grappling. It turns out the dragon buck is actually capable of rotating a full 180 degrees, so you are upside down. The Eve Best explained this. She said, I was literally hanging upside down from the seat belt, from the riding chains, which they needed to do because when you rewatch that scene, when otherwise her hair wouldn't be falling up and away from her body, that she is truly upside down. And realistically, you can see the weight hanging on the riding chains, because those were functional riding chains. They really did hold her upside down on that thing, which she said was not amusing, but was, for the sake of the story. So, just for the sake of getting a realistic that this is someone moving 360 degrees, when they do flips, and they are capable of flipping completely upside down, the actor is really doing that. That they have this gyrating dragon buck rig that can do that they have a camera slightly behind Eve Best, over the shoulder. This is really next-generation work in television that they put into fully realizing air-to-air combat between dragon riders. This has set a new benchmark for that. So, that's the first of 2 points on how they realized this dragon battle. That out-of-universe technical aspects, like the camera work or designing the buck rig that's capable of doing that with the actors. Second point is in-universe. Figuring out how the dragons would fight each other. Like realistic animals, not just cartoon characters doing exciting moves. And again, the behind-the-scenes video is amazing. They explain this. I'm going to link to it. It's free on YouTube. That they said they put a lot of research into how real-life birds of prey fight each other. Like how two eagles would fight each other. And they had this split screen where they show side by side two eagles actually fighting like this, spiraling, and then show this is directly what we based Meleys and Vhagar fighting on. That when you have two birds of prey like hawks or eagles, they instinctively lock talons with each other. And then as they're grappling, they're trying to peck each other with their beaks, and because they're grappling, they can't flap their wings as much. This means they fall in a spiral until at the last minute they separate because they don't want to hit the ground. It's called a daredevil cartwheel. And I had never heard of this, but it makes complete sense that if you think about it, an eagle's talons are much more dangerous than its beak. I mean, these things can gore. They are huge. One swipe of this into the eye or something, you're dead. It'll go into your brain. So it's not an offensive move, it's a defensive move. That instinctively, the first thing they do is lock talons with the other eagle to block them. It's comparable to if you're in a fist fight, you're fighting someone else unarmed. First thing you do is grab the other person's wrists in both of your hands to take their arms out of commission. They can't punch. And then you shift to secondary stuff, kicking and kneeing. That the first thing is, don't let something gore you. And then they try to peck at each other. They even try to do what Meleys did. That's a real-life thing where you lock your talons in a reverse grip, so you're facing the other one upside down, backwards, trying to rip at its belly with your beak. That's a real thing. And I've seen so many things commenting on this in the past week, of just how brutal and realistic and visually amazing that fight looked. And that wasn't like some made-up thing, that they're spiraling like that. Real eagles do that. It is amazing in nature that happens. So a lot of thought went into this of how realistic they should behave. A couple of other things really quick on the ground battle, just because, again, it wasn't the focus, it wasn't meant to be. But watching the behind-the-scenes video, check it out. I do appreciate all the work that went into the behind-the-scenes stuff on the ground battle, that a lot of this was practical effects, that they only go VFX when they have to, but by comparison, they weren't doing what late Game of Thrones did, where they were trying to throw money at the screen, that they thought, if we hire 1,000 people to do the Winterfell battle in Season 8, that'll make it good, without planning, or coordination, or logistics, much less whether the story writing makes sense. I mean, the cover video on my channel is selected clips, about half an hour's worth, from that Last Watch documentary of just how much the battle stuff in Season 8 was falling apart, that through poor logistical planning, that a ton of this was stuff that you could never see on camera and that they didn't film, or we accidentally left people out in the middle of the field, the guys playing dead. Oh, we'd leave them out in the middle of the field and they nearly got frostbite. Oops. Little things like that. They really just didn't understand that this takes work to coordinate. And then the camera work, of course, is awful because it's showing off the actor faces, the pacing doesn't make sense, everything I usually say. This was the opposite of that, and it was from a former Game of Thrones director, Alan Taylor. That the same guy, that it's not him, it's them, like I said before, that a lot of that, the arrow barrages at the very beginning, that's all real stuff. When you see the infantry advancing with the real rams they cut down, that you have arrow teams, that crossbowman is really a two-man team. You have the crossbow guy, and then you have someone holding a two-man shield, this huge shield that he's hiding behind. And they're getting blasted away anyway because they're forcing the siege in daylight, and then the dragon comes. But I just appreciated that also, that yes, they have, and they stress this, the logistics of, we have 4 different groups of heraldry in this. That you have the Targaryens, is what they call them in the script, the Greens, but then with the Golden Dragon, but then also Rosbys, Stokeworths, Darklands, and that's what heraldry is for, coordinating different army groups like that, and it's clearly different. I mean, anybody tell me if during the Battle of the Bastards you could genuinely tell apart the Boltons, Karstarks, and Umbers, even though they were on the same side. Now and again you'd see it on their shield, but just their shields. They didn't really try to make different costuming, because it's all this... Why was everything so dark? I have yet to hear someone explain why the color palette... Because it's winter? They thought, let's leech the color out of everything? I don't know, but no, it's colorful so you can visually distinguish things. That's the whole point. But like I said, I'm wary of a lot of the stuff after Battle of the Bastards. Was they were just quoting numbers at us in videos. I remember that, of the number of stuntmen involved, the number of things, where I was gaping at the screen during, like, the Season 8 Fall of King's Landing. They would quote at us, like, the amount of gravel they had, the amount of fire teams they had, the amount of swords. It's just, this doesn't matter, because it's not even filmed well. The scale doesn't equal quality, but even so, it's quite an achievement that they had a team of 500 extras on this. Kristen Cole's army is a team of 500 extras, and I really appreciate the work that Alan Taylor put into this, which paid off. That unlike the stuff in the Last Watch documentary where it was this monument to poor planning because the boss didn't want to hear that there were problems, I commend Alan Taylor for the logistical, purely the logistics of coordinating this many people behind the scenes. Is like a major public works project. Not just the 500 extras themselves. I mean, the literal army of coordinating, when you see them behind the scenes video, the support teams of everything from the caterers to the costumers to the electricians, of just how much work went into achieving this as a battle. When you're really talking about a movie, it's not even just the people on the camera, but all the support crew, and just the amount of work that went into this was a ton of planning. Well, a few more odds and ends about battle before I move on. Talking about how late Game of Thrones tried to replace quality with scale and throwing money at the screen, and it didn't work, and it was a disservice to the stuntmen and everything, because they did a lot of work, and nonetheless, this doesn't matter if the story isn't good, and if it's not filmed well, or the logistics have problems. For whatever reason, one point that really encapsulated this for me in the behind-the-scenes video, the direct comparison between them both, is that thing where you actually light stuntmen on fire in a suit that it's coated in this Vaseline like gel, so they're only on fire for like 5 seconds, then they yell cut, and then they rush in with fire extinguishers. The stunt where you have someone actually on fire, it's a common thing in film and TV. Both this battle and Game of Thrones actually did that, under the same stunt coordinator, Rolly Earlham, and he's in the behind-the-scenes video talking about it, and it's just the utter contrast of the difference it makes when it's serving the story, that in this, he said we had 8 stuntmen actually on fire at the same time when Maylis flames one of the battering ram teams. And how difficult it was, now he put it together, and a lot of the pyrotechnics with Maylis were actually real on the strafing runs. When people are jumping out of the way, but in this case it's 8 guys actually on fire. And how, yeah, that really served the story. Just that the dragons are fighting, they're attacking the infantry, made sense, I enjoyed it. Compared to, this was one of the follies on late Game of Thrones, they were very proud that they actually set a record for the most stuntmen on fire at one time in the same frame. That they didn't double it up, it was the most stuntmen ever on fire in the same scene, like over 30 guys. When Daenerys burns the Golden Company at the gates of King's Landing, which was not a good scene. And just the hopes and dreams and all the work that went into this from the stunt team, and it just was a terrible scene. And this is, make it clear, this is before Daenerys turned on the civilians. When it made sense that, oh, she's attacking all the military, it's, you spent 2 seasons building up the Golden Company as this major threat, and they never engage other enemy infantry on the battlefield. That before they even fire a shot with this, before they even lock swords, that bizarre thing, and back me up in the comments, that it went from a single scorpion bolt from Euron can take out a dragon, and Daenerys has to flee from a group of them rather than immediately attack him on his ship, to now what? She's circling around the city in a rage, effortlessly taking out all of their battlements, all their emplacements, and then from behind blows out the gate so it burns all the Golden Company. And so much work went into that scene, like the costuming, that they had hundreds of extras, how the Clapton, the costumer, said we designed 8 different distinctive variants on their uniform so the army would look realistic, and just, they don't do anything. This was a cringeworthy moment when she burns out the Golden Company, just because you built this up so much and then nothing happened. You built up the elephants and there were no elephants. Just what? They're suddenly all burned out. If they thought that was meant to be a cool shot, it just fell flat. And I felt so bad for them that the stunt team put work into that. Rolly Earlham's stunt team. But they were bragging, oh, it's the most stuntmen ever burned. Number doesn't equal quality. This was 8, not 30 guys by the same stunt coordinator. And it was drastically better. Just in terms of it serves the story, we're not trying to set records or trying to go, look, let's realistically reflect what would it look like if a dragon was strafing these things with fire. And I know that's silly, I already talked about so many other comparisons, but the specific point of showing off how many stuntmen you had burned versus fewer being burned in something that was better edited, better cinematography and everything, and served the story better. And then the last point here is the cinematography, by the way. I'm going to eventually make a cinematography series. This video is already pretty long, but this podcast. But I said before how I've noticed that the visual style is that Claire Kilner tends to do a lot more POV Steadicam stuff, and Patel likes using crane shots a bit more. And they all work, it's like a Venn diagram, it all overlaps. They all do similar things, that stuff they do better than Game of Thrones is POV shots, Steadicam tracking shots, wide shots for once, and even sometimes crane shots. That Kilner will do she's explained this, it's a Steadicam meant to be looking out of the eyes of someone in the crowd. Patel will use a Steadicam that it's like a bird's eye Steadicam, like when it's swooping through the streets looking at the tavern that Ulf goes into. It's not really, you're not really looking through any one person's eyes, but it's showing off the whole set. with this swooping tracking shot that's a little more objective, or from a crane shot that's a little fancier, which kind of is good. I said before, it takes me a little out of the scene, but in a good way, that, okay, I'm not looking through someone's eyes, but this is an amazing set. If you alternate between the two, it makes the world feel lived in. Taylor's cinematography was a little more traditional, and he wasn't having some giant POV thing. He does that, though. I mean, in episode 1, he did the big Steadicam thing of following Helena. But in this, what really stood out to me was the wide shots. And I know that might not sound impressive to a lot of you compared to this really cool following Helena running or a Steadicam street scene, but it's just, compared to let's show off the actor faces, how frequently throughout the battle there were these epic wide shots, not even of the dragons. I'm just thinking of, it's framed like a beautiful landscape painting of the devastation around Rook's Rest, and there's this tiny speck who's Kristen Cole walking through it. Or at the beginning, when you actually see his whole army walking through the tree line, and he makes it a point to switch to wide shot to show the scale of what is happening. And it looks like a painting, but a landscape painting. Really good wide shots in this, in terms of their styles and what each director does. Kilner's going to direct the next episode. We're going to get 2 new directors in episodes 6 and 7. I wonder what they're going to be like, because they give them a lot more leeway on this show. Oh, talking about the wide shots of the guys coming out of the forest, by the way, if you haven't heard of this before, they mentioned in the behind-the-scenes video, this region of Bourne Wood in Surrey, England, is where they filmed Gladiator. Ridley Scott's Gladiator, the opening fight between the Romans and the Germanic tribes. So they said, we really wanted to show that, and there were several shots which were direct homages to shots from Gladiator of when the army is coming through the tree line. And I mean, just blind luck that this was like a day before the trailer for Gladiator 2 came out. That's pure coincidence. But, oh cool, Ridley Scott's Gladiator. Let's show the army coming out of the tree line the same way. Great stuff. So that's all of the points about the battle. I know I'm like 50 minutes into this, and it's mostly about the battle, just because that's the focus of everything. And that was the first 2 out of 7 points I had about the episode. And that's like 4 pages of my script here, compared to 1 page for all the other points. This will go pretty quickly. It's actually pretty straightforward. Just wrapping up. Point 3, Alice Rivers. Well, in this case, she is important enough that she deserved me saying a lot more, but I could talk about this for half an hour, so like I did with Jason Cragen, I'm going to split off Alice Rivers into a separate video. I mean, I liked it. It's just going over, analyzing specific things they did. Getting a feel for what is their TV version of Alice Rivers like, is Fire and Blood's only an outline. It's hard to tell what do they want to do with Alice. Really liked it that she's not just a Melisandre clone. I liked Gail Rankin's performance. When also talking about cinematography and stuff, I'll eventually do this more in another episode because it'll keep coming up. The dream sequences. In the behind-the-scenes thing, they actually talked about the thought that went into the cinematography of the dream sequences, because, once again, Game of Thrones didn't like doing dream sequences because they're complicated and they didn't know what they were doing. So so many things are like aspects of real cinema that we're finally getting for the first time, real discussions on this. That they'd either avoid dream sequences, there's like 1 or 2 that they really put no thought into in Game of Thrones. In this, they had the cinematographer for P.J. Dillon, the cinematographer for Alan Taylor, directly explain, we had discussions about how is this show going to depict dream sequences in terms of, do we pick different lenses or color filters? Something could be subtle, just the fisheye lens, not a fisheye lens, just the lenses could be different, or the film grade or something. And he said, after a lot of discussion, we decided that the actual film quality, lighting, lenses and stuff, will be exactly the same as the rest of the episode, but context will let you know it is a dream. Which I don't see as laziness, I see it as a conscious choice, that it is more upsetting when you can't tell if it's a dream for a minute or 2. Of, oh no, is this really happening? Is this something upsetting, or is this just a dream? And they work that out. I've made videos a long time ago I took down about that Game of Thrones never put much thought into, like, magic, dream sequency things. I compared it to, like, The Shining and other things of other ways you can show a character in mental distress, like Dutch angles, diagonal camera angles, or how The Shining intentionally broke the 180-degree rule, that they'd have the camera jumping around too much at weird angles just to give you a sense of uneasiness. There's things you can do, or the lenses and stuff. I'm talking about the actual camera grade lighting and lenses and stuff, but they are doing things I wanted them to do in terms of editing. Even though they said it's exactly like the rest of the episode, just except for the content, there are things that fall into place in dream logic, where there's discontinuities. Like, when Daemon walks into the throne room, he does not have a sword on him. That he's wearing sleep clothes, so it's not on his back, it's not in his hands. But then when he cuts off young Rhaenyra's head, a sword just appears in his hand between camera angles, camera shots, which is cool. That's what happens in a dream. The sword was just appearing suddenly. And also, if you notice, when he wakes up, when he's taking a few seconds to get to full consciousness, there's still blood on his hands in a few shots. But then he switches back and looks right at his hand, he's fully awake, and now the blood is gone. But little things like that to signal it's a dream, like editing discontinuities on purpose, or things that couldn't really happen. But there was a discussion about, wow, how do we reflect that this is a dream, was refreshing. But beyond that, that'll come up again next episode. We know Alice has not seen the last of giving him these nightmares. I really liked Alice Rivers to the point I'm going to make a separate video on that. The rest of this I'm not going to split off into separate videos, though. Point 4. Much as I said the last episode, the Riverlands plot is once again great. I have nothing but praise for it. For people who say, oh, this is slow, this is great character work and lore building. He first came to Harrenhal, episode 3, last episode. That was all great. And now, the thing that really surprised me was Oscar Tully. I had a leak that he would show up in episode 7, and I think that leak was true. It's just, it never actually said this is the first time he appears. But I saw a filming description of him riding back into Harrenhal. That must be later in his story arc, I guess. I was not expecting to see Oscar Tully in this episode. The actor is great. Given one scene, he's still pretty good. And just the whole thing, the Tullys are big on family, duty, and honor. It's their motto. I can't just smother my grandfather, even to put him out of his misery if he's bedridden and incoherent. I can't do that. So just little things like that was all perfect. Did you guys catch when Daemon walked past a goat? A goat in Harrenhal. A black goat in Harrenhal. If you read the book, it's Vargo Hoat, he's a cohort mercenary from the Free Cities, and they call him the Black Goat because that's a symbol of Quohor. So it's just this little Easter egg. There's a black goat in Quohor. So that was note perfect. The Alice Rivers, separate from Alice, even the stuff where it's him talking to Oscar Tully, seeing the Blackwoods again. And if you turn on the subtitles, because he's coming out of a dream sequence, it's the kid we saw last season is now grown up, Willem Blackwood, and he states, I am regent for my nephew Benjicott Blackwood. Benjicott exists in the TV show. Going to be making other stuff about the Blackwoods. So Riverlands plot was great. Easter eggs for fans, seeing the Tullys. What more can I add? Point 5. Well, I'm not ranting and raving about this. This was good follow-up to the invented Rhaenyra-Alicent meeting. This was really a Rhaenyra light episode, or Alicent light. But it followed through on things I said last time of they better follow through on this. I can tell they want there to be a character arc with a beginning, middle, and end. And I get that, and they followed through on it. That Rhaenyra was making a last attempt at peace, so her conscience would be clean when, all right, I tried. Now we are to war, and it's war to the knife, and I have to do what I have to do to reunite the realm. And Alicent spiraling into, I acknowledge Viserys didn't want him to be king, and it doesn't even matter. They were always going to take over, and he's not even a good king. And screw it, I'm just going to have some moon tea now. That this is a character arc. And particularly for Rhaenyra, though, that when she comes to the council, and Jace is asking logical questions of where were you, but I like that Jace was good acting, and I love how he's realistically angry, but once she clearly explains, he's reasonable. Once she explains, I made one last attempt to make peace with Alicent, it didn't work, I'm not going to drag my feet anymore, now I'm on your side, we are to war. And he's just, okay, I'm on board with this, what do we do? He's not yelling at her anymore. So that they're on the same page now, that worked out as their good character dynamics. So this worked better than it did in the last episode, where it was kind of sudden, but the word here is follow through. That it followed through on that. It actually was a character arc they were trying to do, not a highlight by any means. But fair enough, you did your homework. Point 6. There was a lot of High Valyrian in this episode. From Millie Alcock, who I liked her cameo here even more than last time. It was a lot longer. It was her dressed in older Rhaenyra clothes, wearing the crown and everything. Just that was a very well filmed dream sequence. You can't hear her at first. The head thing on the ground. But think of all the people who were speaking High Valyrian in this episode. Millie Alcock, of course. Aemond at the council. Even Rhaenys more than just dragon commands. Rhaenys had like one sentence to her dragon of, we go to war again, my friend. But this was a lot of High Valyrian. I mean, David J. Peterson does post notes for every episode, or he tries to, but he didn't for the first two, because there was nothing new or substantial. But it makes sense. He said, like, if there's like one line in episode 5, I'm just going to lump it in with the post I make about episode 6, because it's not worth making a separate thing. Fine, it's fine, because there was a lot in this episode. And he does give everything that she says in it, and taunting him in his dream and everything. So we got a lot more High Valyrian again. Peterson has promised that he was going to develop Southern Low Valyrian when we see the Triarchy again in Season 2, which we know we will, so keep an eye out for that, of just the geeky notes he gives for the language nerds on, okay, this is how it diverged and stuff. So, lastly, we come to point 7, which isn't even a point. I was struggling to come up with 7 things that weren't just all about the battle. Point 7 is several main cast members didn't reappear, and we stuck to mostly the same locations in this. That's not a problem, but this was a very focused episode. There was the Red Keep, Dragonstone, Harrenhal. And we weren't seeing new locations. Like, even when we see new Episode 3 was interesting when, hey, here's this big tavern set that they built that we've never seen before, and the camera's really showing off how detailed it was. We didn't see any new locations this episode. I mean, Rook's Rest isn't really a new location. They say it's this Road Apple minor castle in the Crownlands. It wasn't like hey, and here's what Harrenhal is like, compared to like when we saw it when episode 3, when we saw their version of Harrenhal for the first time, was really interesting. And we will be going to other things a bit, like I know we're going to see the phrase at the Twins next episode, but this isn't a problem. But the bigger issue, I'm talking about locations, the bigger thing is they have devoted some time to the Velaryons every episode. I've talked about this before. They've had 1 or 2 admittedly good scenes that you could tell they knew they have backburnered the Velaryons, and they needed to. The focus of the first 2 episodes was on Blood and Cheese. The focus of the next 2 was on setup and delivery for the Battle of Rook's Rest. It makes sense. They would be backburnered. I'm not having a problem with that. And they made it a point to have them have at least 1 good scene per episode. But it's still, we're waiting for this to be an A-plot, which it probably will in the second half of the season. So I'm not too upset about that. Like, they were, you can tell things are in motion for setting up Adam and Alan, finally revealing Alan is really a bastard, that Rhaenys can tell. Other stuff with the other characters in King's Landing in the background, that like Helena wasn't in this episode. Rhaena wasn't in the episode, and I miss them, but I know why they're doing it. Mysaria was like in the background, but had no speaking lines. So just, there's other subplots I miss, but that's a season scale issue, not an episode scale issue, and we probably will be seeing, looking ahead to the future is my point. I want those other storylines to come to the front now. Like Aegon isn't dead, but he's badly hurt. He won't really be having dialogue-heavy storylines in the next 4 episodes versus what are the other characters going to do. I know very little of what the Greens are going to do in the next 4 episodes, other than that a food riot is coming in episode 7, which we've seen in trailers. But yeah, just I hope the next 4 episodes focus on the characters who were a little backburnered in the first half of the season. But the season isn't over yet. So I'm sorry this is so disjointed. I'm racing this offline stuff. I got to this very late. Obviously, I'm posting this Saturday. I don't want to keep doing that, but I have a lot of other videos in the pipeline which are also delayed because of this. This is why this is just audio only, me ranting as best I can from a script. And that's the other issue, though, that looking ahead, that they really only sent out screener copies for the first 4, maybe 5 episodes, that no one really knows what the end point of the season is, or what we can expect in the next couple of things. We have some spy photos from episode 7. I know almost nothing about episodes 5 and 6. Different directors, what are they doing here? We're starting with 6 and 7 different directors. Look forward to Kilner again next week, but upwards and onwards, we're at the midway point, and what a mid-season finale it was. Like Season 1, how Rhaenyra's wedding was the mid-season climax. This will be the mid-season stopping point for this, so have to get on to all the other videos. If I had more time, I would have edited this better. I apologize. Please like and subscribe. People asked me to make a Patreon because they like paying that way, so I did. It's all free content. Just if you want to donate through Patreon and you have one, I set that up. But matters more to me is please leave a comment, because I try to respond to all of them to keep the community discussion going again after so many months of inactivity that, like I said at the beginning of the video, it really feels like everyone's starting to come back now that they're satisfied with a big battle episode. I just hope they don't start complaining that why isn't there a battle every episode? And it took 3... If I see them cycling up, like, well, if there's a battle every 4th episode, I consider that fair, that it takes time to build up to them. They said that there were 2 big action sequences this season. Rook's Rest is one of them. What's the other one? And my guess is it's not a battle, it's the food riot, because it's really hard to film a riot scene. In which case, we're not seeing, like, other battles that might have come sooner. I don't know. That is a big question going forward. But please like and subscribe. I am sorry for the lateness of this video. I will make it up by posting 20 videos tomorrow, I guess.